Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Gen Live. That's a wrap. Gen's editors reflect on 2022 and look forward to next year. I'm Juliana Lemire, science writer at Gen, and I'll be your host today. So 2022 was a terrific year for science. Despite the waning public health focus on the pandemic, the research on COVID-19 is hotter than ever. And there were a lot of other discoveries that made headlines this year. In addition, after a long time spent at home, we could gather with colleagues and friends in person for the first time, whether it was here in our office in New York or in conferences all over the country. In this episode of Gen Live, I'm thrilled to host the Gen editorial team to share some of our favorite stories from the year. We'll discuss the science that had the biggest impact, some of our favorite interviews from the year, and what we're looking forward to in 2023. And we'll have a live Q&A session too, so I hope you brought your questions for us. So now we'll take a moment to introduce ourselves. Kevin Davis, let's start with you.
Thanks, Juliana. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Davis. I'm the executive editor of the CRISPR Journal and our new journal, which span out of Gen this year, Gen Biotechnology, which we'll be talking about later in the show. And I'm also the author of Editing Humanity, out in paperback, the perfect CRISPR stocking stuffer for the holidays.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And to the other Kevin on our team, Kevin Mayer. Oh, Kevin, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, I'm the senior editor of Gen. I focus mostly on the print magazine, but everything in print eventually gets online as well.
Okay, terrific. And Jeff.
Hi, Juliana. Good to be here. I'm the technical editor for Gen and IPM, also the senior manager for the multimedia group. And as many people out there, if they do webinars or watch the webinars know, I'm the voice of most of the webinars. So great to be here.
We've definitely heard you before, if not seen you before. Terrific. And Faye, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Juliana. I'm the senior editor of Gen Biotechnology, our new peer-reviewed journal that I'm excited to share a bit more about why we're excited we launched this year and what we're looking forward to.
Okay. And Alex?
Hi, I'm a senior business editor for Gen. It means, as the name implies, I focus on a lot of the stories that deal with biotech businesses. And most of my writing is at Gen Edge, which is the premium content tier of Gen.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And Jonathan?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Grinstein. I'm a senior editor at Gen Media Group. I write kind of across the board, but do a lot of work writing for Gen Edge, which Alex just introduced, doing quite a bit of writing on company launches and startup unveilings.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. And last but not least, Damien.
Hi, Juliana. Thank you for inviting me along. My name is Damien Doherty. I'm the editor-in-chief of Inside Precision Medicine, which of course is a sister publication to Gen. Newly rebranded this year and newly reimagined. It was formerly Clinical Omics, so we can talk a little bit more about that later on, but very pleased to be here.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, so we just heard a lot of different kind of sections of Gen. And, you know, there's Gen Edge and Gen Biotechnology, and as you just said, Damien, Inside Precision Medicine. So as a team, just for our audience, we work on or at different aspects of the Gen organization, whether it's the print magazine that's been around for decades or a new online venture that we just started this year. So what we're going to do now is work through each of those exciting things that all the Gen team works on, and we'll kind of do them one group at a time, and then we'll come all together at the end to kind of discuss, you know, all of our kind of what we're looking forward to for next year. And also our holiday plans, if there are any. So we're going to start our conversation today with Gen Magazine, which is the publication that started it all. For that, I'll be joined by Jeff and Kevin Davis and Kevin Mayer. And also we're really missing, we should say, our editor-in-chief, John Sterling, who couldn't be with us today, but hopefully we can kind of have a conversation about what's going on at Gen.
He's here in spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Always here in spirit.
So let's just start with kind of a big general look at last year. So I'll start with you, Kevin Davis. What stood out for you in 2022?
Yeah, I'm going to have to give you a lot of credit for this, Juliana. I think for me, it's been the resurgence of interest and excitement in the world of genomics and especially next-gen sequencing. So I've been watching with a little envy and admiration as you've been visiting all these cool new, very well-funded startups, the Elements, the Singulars, the Ultimas, that over the last 12 months have injected a tremendous amount of new excitement and choice for customers as the price for next-gen sequencing continues to tumble. So it took me back to the halcyon days of the birth of NGS, next-gen sequencing, and one of the pivotal periods in that story was about 20 years ago. I remember going to a conference in Boston and hearing Craig Venter publicly talk for the first time that I'd ever heard anyway, utter this phrase, the $1,000 genome. And we'd only just come off sequencing the Human Genome Project at a price tag of $2 or $3 billion. I thought he was high on some illegal substance. How could somebody, a serious scientist, really be talking about such a profound drop in the price? And that session was fascinating. He brought on stage, it was a bit like an episode of America's Got Talent. He brought on stage 6 companies or star scientists. George Church was among them, giving little 10-minute vignettes of new technologies that they were experimenting with, or in the case of a British company called Solexa, designing pretty PowerPoint slides with very little data to back it up. But that was really the birth of next-gen sequencing. And I suppose, Juliana, you'll have to start investigating why we're still using that term. It's time for something a little bit different. So it's been great to see new companies, in addition to PacBio and Oxford Nanopore, who've been complementing rather than necessarily directly challenging Illumina over the last few years. It's been great to see these new companies, MGI, we should mention as well, really emerge. And so I think next year, starting with JP Morgan in January and then AGBT in February, is going to be a very exciting time, and one that I know you and the rest of the Gen team will be covering avidly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because as you said, the term has stayed around for a long time. So it sounds like from what you're saying has kind of the hyperbole that's been used by companies, because, you know, as a lot of people who talk and write about NGS, it's like the $100 genome is just, you know, that phrase is just so overused, but it has been super fun to watch. And, you know, I love both the company aspect of it and the kind of market part, but also the technologies, which are just like mind-blowingly interesting, just how they each, in a very different way, sequence the genome. So from one, you know, one end to the other, I love that topic so much.
Yeah.
Okay, well, terrific. Yeah, and like you said, I'll be at AGBT, and Alex will be at JP Morgan, and we'll be continuing to cover that right into 2023. Okay, so actually, before we move on to the print magazine, Jeff or Kevin M, anything that struck you about 2022? Any like big takeaways from the year?
Kevin?
Well, there were a few stories. We had a couple on spatial technology. Juliana, you wrote both of those. There were cover stories. Also, cover story on DNA writing. I thought that was important. That came out in December. And also a couple of other articles. One was on psychedelic drugs. And finally, genome edited crops, which could be more nutritious and more resilient in the face of climate change.
Yeah, those are all some of my favorite topics and stories as well. I really like that you picked out the psychedelics too and the CRISPR crops, because I think that one thing that we've been doing, you know, working really hard at Gen, is covering bioprocessing and, you know, the technologies that are still, you know, tried and true technologies and fields, but also trying to be also on the cutting edge of certain things too. And Jennifer Doudna herself told us that agriculture is the place where CRISPR or genome editing will first really, make a huge impact for everyone. And when I asked her why she said that, she said, well, Juliana, everyone's got to eat, which was a very simple way to make a very profound statement. So, okay, great. Jeff, how about yourself?
Well, mine's going to be a little bit more esoteric, I think. Obviously, being a former malariologist, parasitologist, I'm always interested in those articles that come out for the year, but one of which ties into something that was really big this year and has been for a couple of years. But there were two papers that came out really just in the last 2 months, November and December, and they're really talking about malaria vaccine work. One of which is from the NIH group using a monoclonal antibody that actually Anthony Fauci himself commented on the effectiveness. Obviously, that falls under his purview at the NIAID. And so, it's looking pretty good for that. Obviously for malaria vaccines, it's something that we have to always keep an eye on. They start out looking good and then get larger, sometimes not so much. But the other one just came out the beginning of this month from Nirbhay Kumar's group at George Washington University, who I knew of when I was still working in the field, but they were doing mRNA vaccines, which is, again, something that obviously has been huge in terms of topics this year for Gen webinars. There have been lots of talk about that from every angle: cancer, obviously, for COVID, for flu, from production of them. So lots of our sponsors are trying to help those in the Gen audience to, make their mRNA vaccines better, improve the technology and so forth. So they're the ones that actually, for me, that were interesting. Again, like I said, a bit more esoteric, but still nonetheless pretty interesting stuff.
Okay, yeah, terrific. Oh my goodness, mRNA vaccines. I mean, we'll hear so much more about that next year, I'm sure. So Kevin Mayer, let's go back to you for a second. You've been working at Gen for almost 10 years, I believe. So, and you have read every issue cover to cover, I think, since in the last 10 years. So how has Gen changed since you arrived, would you say?
I'd say the main change that stands out for me is the switch from the tabloid format to magazine format. As a tabloid, we used to look like the New York Post. However, our headlines were less scurrilous. But now with the magazine format, I think we have a different, not just a different look, but it kind of forces us to perhaps be a little bit less newsy and a little bit more analytical. The problem is with a monthly print magazine, it's hard to be up to the minute with news. So it really doesn't serve that function as much. So I think we lean more heavily on the features and the special reports now. Also, another change is we have a lot more people doing writing in-house. We used to rely a lot on contributed pieces and freelancer written pieces and regular contributors. However, we're getting a lot of in-house pieces now. And I think it gives the magazine more of a personality.
Yeah, terrific. And we should also, I want to make sure that we give a shout out to our art director, James Lambo, because with the switch over to the magazine, right now we have these amazing covers, which James designs and puts together and and we work together as a team to come up with, what's appropriate and also looks great. And so we're so lucky to have James as part of our team as well. And those covers, I mean, we're just doing the one for January right now. And it's just so much fun to kind of think about how are we going to put this article into a picture, so I really like that work that we've been doing on the covers.
I really like it when James can put together something unique. If we happen to have a really beautiful image from a story that we've prepared, it's the natural for the cover, but sometimes we don't. And James steps in and he pulls something together and makes something unique. I prefer those covers, really.
Yeah, they're great. Okay, and so the other thing that we could do this year was travel. So Kevin Davis, how did it feel to be traveling again? And what were some of the great conferences that you made it to?
Yeah, it was good. my first conference was probably the CRISPR, the Grassroots CRISPR Community Conference, a pretty small affair in Cambridge. It was this summer, several hundred folks in attendance there. Then hopped over to Edinburgh for the European Society of Gene and Cell Therapy. That was good. Hadn't had haggis in a few years, so that was enjoyable. Very well organized meeting. They kept it in Edinburgh over the years that were postponed for the pandemic. I think culturally people really wanted to make sure they got Edinburgh in the rotation of conference venues. And then in October, went to Los Angeles, went to a PacBio concert, and a genetics conference broke out. I think that's the joke. PacBio got a very cleverly, I think, going back to the next-gen sequencing theme that we opened the show with, decided to one-up pretty much all of their competitors by an all-star announcement at a nearby theater next to the convention center, in which the CEO unveiled the two new instruments that you've written about, Juliana, and covered in depth. And that was the preamble to a full set from Maroon 5. He joked, he told you that he would have preferred Coldplay, but they're a bit too expensive for the PacBio budget. But if sales take off, maybe we'll get them next year. So good to be back. I think the numbers were pretty close, certainly in Los Angeles, to pre-pandemic levels, but with COVID cases beginning to tick up again, it will of course be very interesting to see how shows like AGBT handle themselves in the first few months of next year. Hopefully things will continue to go without too much inconvenience.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I made it to some conferences this year. AGBT, although it was postponed from February to June, they did get it in, which was terrific. Also to SynBioBeta in Oakland last spring, which was great. And also was able to make it to San Diego to the Illumina Genomics Forum, which Maroon 5 wasn't there, but Barack Obama was. So, you know.
It's a good trade-off.
So either way, it was terrific. And Jeff, you were in LA as well, right?
I was, yeah. I was there with Kevin. I unfortunately came in a little late, missed the concert, but it was the talk of the conference for sure. It was nice to be back in person for sure. I agree with Kevin. It had the feel of like a pre-pandemic scenario. So it was very, I mean, more masks obviously than pre-pandemic, but certainly people and the feel, just the vibe in general. I think there was a sort of electricity that went through it, that people were just happy to be back, making those connections. So.
Okay, yeah. The other thing that Christian Henry from PacBio told me is that I said, well, are the instruments going to be on stage? And he said, no, we don't want Maroon 5 to break them.
Smash a guitar.
Smashing guitars into their $1 million.
That's a hazard if you mix a rock concert and NGS instruments. Okay, so Jeff, I want to stay with you for just a moment to talk about all the work that your team, the multimedia group, has been doing for Gen, because it's one huge change from the pandemic, is we've done so many terrific events online, and your team has adapted to just like do this so beautifully and with such high production value. So can you tell us about some of the projects or any favorites that stick out to you, or any trends that you're seeing in some of our online content that you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, just a shout out to the multimedia group. I've been really lucky to have a great team, a couple whom are on in the back scenes of this event right now. So, Bobby Grandone, Danny Buddha, who are on right now, but the rest of my team, Leanna Jebs and Hannah Turner, who always help out with the event. So, again, they've been doing a great job. We work together and to put these events on, like you said, these sort of, most of a, full day type of event, from anything from, a sponsored event from where we do have partners come in and want to talk about something specific, and center a whole day around that. We've had a couple of sponsors doing the Emulate Bio is one that was Oregon on Chips, that was very successful. We had an mRNA day that was obviously extremely successful as well too. And not to mention, one we shout out that we do a lot now is the Rosalind Franklin Society, and I think we'll probably maybe talk a little bit more about that later. But we produce those events for it's sort of our nonprofit organization for targeting or talking about women in science and underrepresented minorities in science, which obviously is important as ever these days. So we've been having those events go on. They've been going pretty smoothly, I think. People seem to be happy with everything. I think we've been able to get some really great people. Obviously, you yourself know, Juliana, it was great discussion with Jennifer Doudna when we had the State of Biotech in September for Gen Edge. We were also able to talk to Bob Langer, who will be on this Friday again for another webinar to kind of really dive deep into some mRNA delivery topics and so give some background into his perspective on the field as he's gone through, which obviously he has a tremendous perspective. Peter Hotez, as well as just an array of other presenters from NGS to CSI type stuff. So it was quite the event. I think really went off really well. So.
Yeah, we have covered a lot of topics this year, to your point. And, when you said Peter Hotez, I just wanted to say that one nice thing, and I know he pointed this out, was we're so lucky to have so much time to spend with these guests, whether it's 45 minutes or like in Gen Live, how we do it for an hour. And he said to us something like, when he's on CNN, he gets like 4 minutes to basically say everything he's got to say. But, we have these great just breadth of conversation with people. You just get to ask them. Like when I interviewed Jennifer Doudna, there was not enough time. I had so many questions, and I got so many in. And so
and it was a great interview nonetheless, but yeah, I can imagine, just the sheer number of, questions you want to ask them. My producer, Bobby, actually just pointed out too in the chat that, we did speak to Tony Fauci as well. That was for one of our journals, but we ran that on Gen as well too, because it obviously has a significant impact for that audience. That was, obviously nice to be able to, be on with him and chat with him briefly, but listen to that conversation, which is always, and it was beyond just COVID, talking about, obviously for anyone who's unaware, obviously Tony Fauci made his name originally in HIV research. And so he talks a lot about that and even what to expect, or what he thinks young researchers should do, coming up and so forth. So it's a nice little interview. Check that out.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Rosalind Franklin Society too, because so they have their annual meeting, every year, obviously, but has moved online the last couple of years. Typically it would have been in person, but we just did it just maybe 2 weeks ago, right, Jeff?
Yeah. Correct.
And that was terrific too, promoting women in STEM, and just having some great panels of both veteran researchers, also much, more early career scientists talking about the, specific challenges that are present for women and underrepresented minorities in science today.
Yeah.
So where can people find that now, Jeff?
So the Rosalind Franklin Society website is just rosalindfranklinsociety.org, I believe.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. But there's usually some links to that on Gen as well too. We'll be posting some more of the videos on the Rosalind Franklin Society YouTube page as well in the upcoming weeks, so people can take a look at those if they haven't seen them.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Kevin Davis, I'll ask you to stay on the screen for a little bit, but Jeff and Kevin Mayer, we'll see you back here in a little bit.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you. And now we're going to welcome the Gen Edge team. So Jonathan and Alex, if you could join us, that would be great. And Alex, I'll ask you to start by telling us, what is Gen Edge for any of our audience that doesn't know, and when did it start, and what prompted starting it? How did this get started?
Sure. Thanks, Juliana. Gen Edge is Gen's premium content tier. We focus on stories with both a science edge and a business edge as well, pardon the pun. We look at whether it's early stage companies with some interesting new technologies that have shown some form of success, whether that's raising a lot of capital, whether that's generating some early but definitive positive data. In some cases, we focused on companies that acknowledge that they're in the soup, that they need to turn it around, and detail how they plan to do so. That came up over the last year with Bluebird Bio, the gene therapy developer, that after a series of commercial and clinical missteps, wound and a spin-off of its cancer pipeline in 2021 wound up where they were really kind of far gone. They laid off 30% of their staff earlier in April, and but they showed some signs of new life, as in 2 approvals of 2 of their 3 gene therapies by the FDA, and a third one is set for review and a decision in 2023. That would be an example. But we look for, we started it at the end of 2019, talk about timing, because we felt that at Gen there was a gap. We were always been strong in covering whether basic research and R&D, but our business coverage was sort of on and off over the years. John would tell you if he were here that in the 90s, for example, and into the early 2000s, there was they had some pretty good coverage, but that after the 2008 recession, Gen stepped back from that a little bit. And that affected me because I came here in 2011 and I was told originally that we don't do a lot of business coverage. Well, that changed because a lot of the news, I was doing daily news, was deal du jour. Here's a collaboration, and the dollar amounts kept going up, and some of the science behind them was more of interest, and that brought more readers. And eventually, between that and the A-lists, which we've done over the years, we were able to show that there's some interest, at least through some of our readers, for business-focused coverage as well. So that's how Gen Edge started. Now, the pandemic hit within a couple of months of us starting. We've kept it going. We, at first, were pretty slow about putting new things on, but at least we were steady. So as long as we had something, at least one or two things a week. Now we've stepped that up in light of the quicker pace of news, but also Jonathan Grinstein joining us earlier this year and covering a lot of new companies as well. So it's been a new dimension and gives us a little bit more to offer.
Okay, terrific. Thanks. Kevin, let me go to you for a second. So you work across so many different areas of Gen, whether it's Gen, peer-reviewed journals, and Gen Edge. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what's unique about the work that Gen Edge is doing?
I think Alex said it very well. The rationale for doing this is that Gen, over 40 years, has really, and John Sterling, the chief editor, would say this precise phrase if he was here, its forte, its mission has been to cover the tools and technology undergirding the biotechnology industry. And as Alex, I think, very eloquently stated, there's much more to it than that. And we wanted to give our readers and our audience, particularly as the biotech industry, it's gone through a pretty tough 12 months or so, but it's been booming for many years before that, giving them information that we think they could really value. And plus it helps diversify our business as well. So in the very capable hands of Alex and Jonathan, we now have reporters who are able to profile star scientists, chief executives, cool, cutting edge startups. Maybe they've just raised a lot of money. Maybe they're companies you've never heard of, but you will. And we think Gen Edge is a great portal to this information that is very, very difficult to get anywhere else. It's not just in-depth written stories, but it's also video series that you won't find anywhere else. So for example, 18 months ago or so now, we launched a video component of Gen Edge called Close to the Edge, where we've interviewed some really exciting, notable scientists on the brink of doing some pretty special things, largely in the clinic, but also elsewhere. And we look to develop more of that sort of programming in the new year.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Kevin. So Jonathan, you joined the Gen Edge team just this past year. So what do you enjoy about writing for Gen Edge? And I know it might be hard, but I mean, what's one favorite story or maybe a couple of favorite stories that you've covered this year?
Yeah, thanks, Juliana. It's been a blast. I joined in May and it's flown by with the nonstop cutting edge research and companies I get to cover with Gen Edge. Like I said at the very beginning, I really enjoy getting tapped into the company launches and startup unveilings. It's such a privilege getting to hear people begin to materialize their ideas from, the back of napkins and quiet rooms or dark rooms and bars and whiteboards into these budding businesses. And so there's really few things that I enjoy more than hearing the excitement of a biotech founder talk about the mission and vision behind their tech. But yeah, how to narrow it down to just a few stories. Some of the ones that really caught my eye were there's been a couple people working to expand the genome editing toolkit from different ways. There's companies discovering new nucleases like Metagenomi and Arbor. They're doing work looking at super remote locations on the planet, trying to discover, nucleases and other kinds of genome editing tools, from natural sources that you may never think to look at, to companies like Tessera and Tome, which is still a bit under wraps, that are doing gene writing stuff. We're going to get to see the beginning of full-on genes getting written into the genome soon, which just has amazing clinical significance and application. Like you said, Juliana, that Jennifer mentioned to you that everyone's got to eat. There's really cool work being done in the food and agriculture space. I'm working on a piece right now with a company called Pairwise. They're making what they're calling better foods. And their approach is, like, for instance, one of their first products is they're taking the bitterness out of mustard greens so that they can take, this very nutritious green that no one really likes to eat into a mouth-watering product. So, it's quite the span of things going on there. And, there's really neat stuff also in the psychedelic medicine space, people trying to separate out the compounds that have clinical significance or medicinal value from their, psychoactive ingredients. So I did a story with a company called Delix. So that's some of the stuff I've really, really enjoyed to do, but I mean, I could go on and on.
Pairwise also has the berries, right? Seedless berries, I think, are coming soon.
Yeah, seedless blackberries and pitless cherries.
There you go. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we'll watch for those in 2023. So, Alex, I know you watch the business side of the biotech so carefully, and you watch the numbers so closely. So are there any trends that you're seeing in the market right now that are, that you found interesting?
Yeah, I am. One thing I've seen, I'll give you two examples. One example for most of this year, it's known that there's been a decline in venture financing and the number of IPOs. What was interesting is in getting numbers, the amount and the number of deals, if you look year over year in the first 3 quarters of this year, was down about a third. And if you narrow down on Q3, the third quarter, it was down closer to a half. Now, it's just, again, I think deals will start to pick up, or actually are picking up in the fourth quarter, because we've seen some big ones just in recent days, whether it's on the merger and acquisition side with Amgen shelling out $27.8 billion for what's now the top deal of the year with a couple of weeks to go, their acquisition of Horizon Therapeutics. To show you the power of Edge, I mean, just 2 years ago, we'd sat down with the CEO of Horizon Therapeutics, and at that point, he was talking about M&A too, but he was talking about buying other companies and smaller potato players in the field. And it's amazing how the shoe is on the other foot, and this time he's the bought company and very willing at the price that Amgen's come up with. Also, one thing happening more recently is that the top of the what do you call exchange traded funds, these are funds that invest in groups of biotech companies and not just one individual stock. The top one, IBB, is now about down 10% in its stock price year over year. So what? So it was down 30% back in the spring and into the early summer. So you're seeing some signs of life. We're not back to where we were in 2020 or 2021, and we're not going to be in 2023. But it is stepping forward. You're seeing bigger deals. I mean, just this week, Takeda shelling out $4 billion up front, $6 billion total to buy a type 2 inhibitor from Nimbus Therapeutics that showed some decent phase 2 data, although now Takeda's talking about expanding that within autoimmune indications beyond just psoriasis, and we'll see how that plays out this year. So those numbers, I'm going to want to see some more evidence of and more of a bounce back this year. We'll see.
And Alex, what are your I know you mentioned the Bluebird bio. I'm not sure if that was your favorite story, but like, what are the stories that you just really love digging into?
I mean, things I love this year, the interview with Peter Hotez that ran in the State of Biotech. That was interesting because Peter was the first big name speaker who accepted an invite to appear on the State of Biotech when we started calling out people and emailing them for invites. And what struck me was that both he and his assistant in emails and all the way through the interview, Peter was very friendly and very approachable. And sometimes people who are pretty prominent in their fields aren't for whatever reason. And so that was nice. I was a little saddened, though, because of the resistance and he became very public defender of public health measures, including vaccines, including masks and the like for COVID-19. He had quite a blowback. Some of that is differences in policy or approach. Hey, that's one thing. But when others attacked him for his religion, that's out of bounds and ought to be. Now, on a brighter note, the other thing I liked was being back in in-person events. I covered the Chardan 6th Annual Genetic Medicines Conference in Manhattan back in October. And in between all the company presentations, they did have some name speakers, two of them of interest. John Maraganore, who was formerly the CEO of Alnylam, and the other is pioneer researcher and now investor Jim Wilson from UPenn. And Jim is someone I actually have been at one time worked with because he was the editor of Human Gene Therapy, one of our journals. And at that point, I was writing gene therapy briefs for Jim, and we were going through those. I do that with Kevin now. So Jim and John shared their insights, and a little bit, I can't say totally informal, but it wasn't quite as formal or stuffy given the investor audience. So they let out a little bit of their own insights into the field. I summarized those into an article that actually got a lot of readers this fall. And that kind of surprised me because, sometimes you dig down into the nitty gritty of a profile, but there's also an adage in the news business, names make news. And Jim and John were examples of that this year.
Okay. Yeah, terrific. Thanks so much, Alex. I want to give the Gen Edge team, Kevin, I'll give the last 2 minutes to you. Can you tell us what we should expect from Gen Edge in 2020?
Well, I think you'll expect more great reporting, chiefly from Alex and Jonathan. I think you've already seen and heard the passion and expertise that they bring to this new tier of Gen's news offerings. But we want more people to check it out in 2023. So in order to encourage that, we've changed the way that you can get a sample of Gen Edge exclusive reporting. You can sample or read, I think it's now 5 stories before we do the necessary and ask for you to consider taking out a subscription. And there's also group discounts for organizations, academic or industry. So if there's a group of you and your colleagues who you think this might be useful to in the workplace, and why wouldn't it be, then go to the Gen Edge portion of the Gen website. It's all there on the Gen homepage, and check out the options. And we hope you'll sign up next year. Okay, terrific. Thanks so much, Gen Edge team. We'll see you in a little bit.
Damien, can you join me to talk about Inside Precision Medicine? Yes, and you just need to unmute.
How many times have we had to say that in the last 3 years? So yeah, no, listen, thank you for having me on. Really good to be here. It's been an interesting year. It's been a really fulfilling year, actually. You know, we were tasked with a complete reimagination of what was formerly known as Clinical Omics, and we rebranded to Inside Precision Medicine. And it's been really interesting because, you know, it's such a broad space, the precision medicine landscape. And part of that, you know, my view was to try and expand, not only do the rebrand, so we did that, we changed the name. Clinical Omics had done a very, very good job for many, many years. It had really established itself in the market. There was very little like it out there in terms of the coverage, but sometimes the word Clinical Omics became a bit of a misnomer, or it caused confusion. A lot of companies that had research only products would say, well, we're not in the clinical space. And we were saying, well, yeah, but we're not just a clinical magazine. So we thought it was prudent to rename it. And of course, the precision medicine market is growing exponentially. So it made absolute sense to call it Inside Precision Medicine. I'd had a background in precision medicine in terms of publishing a journal and running an event. So we renamed, and then we brought in some fresh design, and we expanded the coverage. Basically, we thought, well, let's try and, you know, really look at it from, you know, research to the clinic and really try and fill in some of those gaps. So what we've done is we've brought in more contributors. We've produced more columns. We've looked at certain facets of the industry, whether it's the investment piece, reimbursement piece, the regulatory piece, the sort of the legal piece. And we've broadened the scope in terms of some of the subject matter. And I think it's definitely had a great impact this year, and it's been great to take something and sort of doff our cap to the old product, but sort of take it into the next chapter. And I think we've done that very, very well. And so, you know, we've expanded the editorial team, and you know, I always look for new pools of different writers and contributors. And it's been very gratifying, actually, and we've obviously finished now. We started in January. We've done 6 issues, just put literally the December issue to bed yesterday, so that's done and dusted. You know, you can't take your foot off the gas. You got to crack on with the next one, which will obviously be upon us quicker than we ever think. So it'll be back in on February, but it's been a really good year, and I think it's established ourselves as definitely the definitive voice, I think, for precision medicine. We're really unparalleled. There really isn't another magazine in the market that covers the panoply of subjects that we cover, and I think more to come next year, certainly in terms of subject matter and more contributions. So yeah, it's been great.
Well, the magazine looks amazing, you know, for anybody who hasn't seen it. But I want to talk about topics for a second. So you said you've expanded subject matter. So what, you know, for any audience member who doesn't know, what are the topics that are really the bread and butter of IPM? And then what are some of the topics that you're exploring now too?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's funny because there obviously is a little bit of crossover from some of the topics that of course you yourself cover. You know, we've covered single cell genomics a lot this year, and spatial transcriptomics. It's funny. I look back at some of the issues in preparation for our chat, and I was absolutely amazed to see the breadth of what we had covered, from, you know, drug repurposing to gene therapy to genomic surveillance. That was a big feature that we ran. Obviously, that was very timely given what we've gone through in terms of COVID. But, you know, we cover everything from infectious disease to chronic diseases. Obviously, oncology is always going to be a staple subject matter for us, which is hence why we launched a new newsletter this year, a precision oncology newsletter that we run now on a weekly basis, which has been doing very, very well. But also there'll always be lingering issues around reimbursement, some of the regulatory challenges around precision medicine, how we scale it, how we pay for it, how we democratize it, how we make it accessible, not only to people that live in urban centers, but in rural areas. Ethics, ethics plays a big part, when you look at areas like, well, certainly areas like CRISPR, of course, and Kevin can speak to this, of course, in terms of some of the ethical ramifications. Even around newborn screening and some of the work we've been doing here in the UK with Genomics England, there are always ethical concerns that we have to consider. And again, that's partly why we partnered with the National Society of Genetic Counselors this year, because we felt, genetic counseling is such an important area that is so critical to the sort of the understanding of how we educate not only the lay public as to how important genomics is and genetic testing, but making sure we're doing it in a very measured way. But of course, the complete paucity of genetic counselors out there is a huge challenge. We just don't have enough. So the educational piece is something that always runs through IPM. We're always trying to make sure that the educational piece is there. And also, as obvious it may sound, it's very easy not to mention the patient. You can run all these great articles on tools and technologies and companies and talk about deals and mergers and acquisitions, but we have to not lose sight of putting the patient front and center. So for me personally, stories around rare disease always resonate. They're always very, very impactful when you really get to hear the human story. So, we ran a rare disease supplement with the current issue that just, as I said, has gone to print, and really, really powerful stories about, that whole community and really the power of the parents indeed. It's the rare parents behind these poor children in many cases that are really fighting to get heard, fighting to either create their own nonprofits, fighting to create their own biotech companies, because they know that ultimately they have to do something. And it's so important. I interviewed Jim Geraghty, who wrote a book for the recent issue on the orphan drug industry. And, it's been nearly 40 years since the Orphan Drug Act was passed in the early 80s. But, he made a very prescient comment that we still have to be vigilant in an era of Roe versus Wade. Things can be rolled back. Things can be unraveled. We have to be vigilant. We have to be constantly pushing for change. And I think the rare disease community know that better than anybody. So all these topics will be covered again next year. As I said, the list: liquid biopsies, CRISPR, companion diagnostics, AI. Of course, we covered that. We kicked off the year with AI, how it can start to help in population health, how it's making a huge impact in many different facets of precision medicine, in image analysis, and being more predictive. And I think that's the key. I think precision medicine is all about how do we take it from a sick, we're sick care, really. We need to be predictive healthcare. We need to make sure that we're reacting way before sickness becomes apparent. And I think, certainly with cancer, we need to be predicting it and preventing it a lot earlier. And that's where we'll start to see some huge success, I think. So lots more next year. We're going to be doing more columns, more broadening the subject matter. Of course, we'll still cover the same topics, but there's always a new angle, isn't there? As the technology evolves and it develops, there's always a new angle we can take. But for next year, certainly looking at doing our own virtual conference as well. So that would be great. We're going to do sort of mimic what you've done very successfully with State of Biotech and obviously with your impending genomics conference, but we're going to be looking at a state of precision medicine. So get some leading lights to come and talk about some of the thornier, more challenging issues that we're facing.
Okay, terrific. Well, thanks so much, Damien. Those are all such important conversations that need to be had, like you said, with patients, patient advocacy groups, genetic counselors. So I'm so glad that IPM is really just giving all of this, just part of this conversation, and giving even more airtime to all these different facets of precision medicine. And do you want to say anything? I was going to actually ask you about the summit coming up. Do you want to say any details about that, or just kind of leave it a surprise?
Well, no, it's coming up in May next year.
Okay.
I'm already busy sort of looking at the agenda, how we're going to shape that, who we're going to recruit. But, we want to make it It'll be high level, sort of 10,000-foot approach of what's going on, looking down at some of the, it'll be sort of looking back, if you will. I mean, precision medicine has been in the parlance, has been in the sort of lexicon, if you will, for probably now, I'd say nearly 10 years. So it's like, where have we come? But probably even going back 20 years, you know, what's happened since mapping the human genome? Where have we progressed? What's been the success? And really, where are we mapping for the next 10 years? So it's a look back, but with a view to be able to look forward. So we may even go back to some of those original protagonists that were instrumental in creating some of the first sort of personalized targeted drugs. But nonetheless, we'll also have another element where we can be a bit more immersive, and we'll have breakouts where we can get a bit more into the weeds and do some really nice roundtables to sort of cover some of these myriad of topics that I mentioned. So that's coming in May. The more details coming imminently in the new year. As I said, just more of the same. Keep tuned, and we'll continue to do our webinars and our online offerings, and you know, it's there's plenty to talk about, so never a dull moment.
All right, well, we'll look forward to all of that. Thanks so much, Damien.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and our last group for today is going to be the Gen Biotechnology team. And before I ask you about the journal specifically, Kevin, I'm glad that Damien brought up our State of Genomics Summit coming up. Do you want to mention that for a second as we prepare to talk about Gen Biotech?
Let's make sure we get that under the wire. So we've touched on the State of Biotech, which was Gen's kind of flagship virtual event last September. It ran over 2 days. It had an all-star lineup, including Jennifer Doudna, Bob Langer, Peter Hotez, and some fascinating panels that everybody on the program today chaired or helped organize. So we want to continue those events, brilliantly produced by Jeff and his team. So the first one next year will be the State of Genomics and NGS. It will take place at the end of February, noting, not coincidentally, that that's also the 70th anniversary of the double helix. And registration will be open very soon. We're just putting the final touches on the agenda, but the confirmed speakers include, I'm thrilled to say, Pardis Sabeti from the Broad, Chris Mason, Niall Lennon, also from the Broad, Karen Meager, who co-directed the Telomere to Telomere Consortium, and the brilliant British author Matthew Cobb, who just had a fantastic book called As Gods published on the history of genetic engineering, and is working on a new book, a new biography of Francis Crick. So we thought, what a perfect opportunity to bring Matthew back on into the Gen fold and have him talking about some of the research and new information that he's uncovered on a story that we think we know very well. So that will be a 4-hour event at the end of February, completely free to register. If anybody's interested in supporting that from a sponsorship angle, we'd love to hear from them. That should be a must-attend flagship event for us. And as we'll then follow that with the State of Precision Medicine and a few other more specialized topics, followed by an encore presentation, year 2 of the State of Biotech in the fall of next year.
Okay. Thank you. Now we want to finish out our discussion today talking about Gen Biotechnology, a new peer-reviewed journal that was launched this past year. Faye, you launched the journal together with Kevin. So what kind of sparked the idea to do that? And also, what kind of research are you looking to publish in Gen Biotechnology?
As you mentioned, Juliana, Gen Biotechnology is a brand new peer-reviewed journal publishing original research and perspectives across the biotech field, and we just launched this February 2022. One of the things that motivated the inception of this journal is that when you look at the publishing space, there are very few journals that cover the broad scope of biotechnology from sustainability to therapeutics. There's definitely one big name that comes to mind when we think about biotech journals, but overall, biotech research often falls within a wide array of more niche journals. And this is a theme that I hear when I talk with biotech authors. There's this question of which journal should I submit to? Is this journal going to reach a broad audience or stay within this niche community? What we offer with Gen Biotechnology is building a modern community where you can get this wide breadth in one journal. We're also spanning academia and industry during a time of biotech when you have countless technologies going to market and startups launching. There's something about launching in 2022 that allows us to emphasize modern values, and that refers to our scientific coverage, but also our dedication to diversity, equity, inclusion, and uplifting voices that have been historically underrepresented. And our editor-in-chief, Hannah El-Samad, Senior Vice President and Director of Science Integration, Innovation, and Insights at Altos Labs, is an absolute champion for those core values, in addition to being a phenomenal scientist herself. And we have a phenomenal editorial team with many of us on this Gen Live episode here who have supported the journal with their writing, including yourself, Juliana. We also have a strong editorial board of diverse voices and leaders in biotech, and overall impactful vision that we look forward to sharing with you all as we continue to grow as a journal. So that's a bit about the inception. I'll also, Kevin, if there's anything you'd like to add as well before we dive into what kind of research we're looking to publish.
No, you've got it, Faye. Carry on.
All right, carrying on. Now, Juliana, you mentioned what kind of research are we publishing? And what's exciting is that biotech is an incredibly broad field. We cover topics ranging from environmental biotech, gene editing, drug discovery, cancer research, spatial biology, artificial intelligence. The list really goes on. Some of the research that we've published so far covered CRISPR-based pest control, cost-effective bioprinting, gene editing in livestock, and synthetic signaling circuits, just to give a few examples. We're interested in all research under that biotech umbrella, and we hope to provide a platform for biotech researchers to share their work with the broad community. So if you're listening and have an original research paper, we would love to hear from you. And we're actively seeking submissions. You can also look at our full aims and scope on our website, genbiotechjournal.com.
Okay, terrific. And Faye, you've been here, I think, just about a year. I mean, what is it that you enjoy about working in scientific publishing?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Juliana. I absolutely love being immersed in the diversity of science that is out there. After completing the PhD track and dedicating years to one particular area of study, I knew I wanted to transition to a field that could immerse me in the full breadth of science. And working with a broad scope journal like Gen Biotechnology definitely fulfills that. The other thing that I love is having opportunities like Gen Live to speak to the community about what excites me, whether that be in science, career path, and overall values. So having opportunities to put my voice out there and help others share their voice to the biotech community is something that I find very fulfilling. It's also a role that we need more PhDs to fill. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Juliana, and also Kevin, Jonathan, and others who have made a similar transition to learn from your path, because for the longest time, I didn't see other people who had the same interest to leave research behind. So having a community is also one of the great things about being in the field.
Terrific. Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so I think we're gonna bring everyone back together in our last 2 minutes. And I actually haven't seen too many questions from the audience. If you have one, please put it into the chat. I don't think I mentioned that in the beginning, so that could be my fault. But so I'm curious what everybody is doing over the holidays. I'll start. I'm going to the beach. So I'm very excited about my plans. So Jeff, do you have any plans for the holidays?
I mean, besides wearing really, horrible, ugly sweaters, no, I'm pretty good. Going back to Philly, hometown, got to support my Eagles, that kind of thing, but just family and so forth. So.
And I can go around. Sure. How about Kevin Davis? Where are you headed?
Heading back to the old country, aim to come back recharged and ready for a busy and fun and exciting 2023.
Okay, terrific. Alex, any plans?
No, other than I'll be at home with family, Karen and my son, who is grown, and we'll have a quiet holiday together. And then I'll take some time off at the last week of the year, but I'll be back in January, raring to go and ready for action, and heading for San Francisco.
Oh, yes, that's right. You'll be off to JP Morgan. Okay,
As
well,
and Jonathan is heading there too. So
yeah. Okay, and Jonathan, any plans over the holidays? Besides JP Morgan?
Yeah, just resting up for that, I guess. I'm based out of San Diego, so maybe it'll be warm enough to go to the beach, but I doubt that. So just resting up.
Okay, and Faye, any plans?
Yeah, I'm the other SoCal representative on this episode here in Los Angeles, and I'll actually be going up north to cold San Francisco. Cold for the holidays.
Yeah, it's all relative. Talking to us in the Northeast. Damien, how about yourself?
I certainly won't be going to the beach because that would be just lunacy here anyway. So I know I'll just be spending it with my girls, my two daughters, and anyone that's into 90s hip hop. On Sunday, I'm going to see A Tribe Called Quest, if that means anything to anybody.
Nice.
So that'll be good. But no, it's going to be a very relaxing Christmas, and yeah, looking forward to it, and just take a few days out and then back on with 23. So yeah, all good.
Okay, and Kevin, Mayor.
Heading upstate, visiting some family, which includes a new grandson.
Oh, yes,
Hey.
terrific. Oh, well, congrats. Okay.
He's 9 months now. So.
Yeah.
Oh, same one. Okay. I thought maybe there was a second new one, but okay. Well, still great. Okay, terrific. I think that brings us to the end of this session of Gen Live. I want to thank all of my colleagues for such a fun and terrific conversation. And I'm really looking forward to what next year brings for all of us at Gen. I can hear the construction is starting up. We finished in just the right time. As always, a huge thank you to the Gen production team for making this episode run so smoothly. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Gen Live will be back next year with a terrific lineup of shows. Some topics we'll be discussing are that crowded NGS market we were talking about before, spatial biology, DNA writing and DNA storage, CRISPR, and more. Please keep your eyes open for those shows as well. I'm Juliana Lemure. Happy holidays, and I'll see you next year.